All right, everybody, welcome to the stream. We are live coming at you for another midweek video about the Seattle Seahawks. It is Seahawks Brendan Nelson, and as always in these weekly videos, I am joined by Brandon of the Hawks Nest. Brandon, welcome.
Thank you, Brennan. Appreciate you having me aboard again, as always.
So, we've got some stuff to talk about today. We've got a big game coming up. Maybe no team can influence their destiny this season more than the Seahawks can this week. A win and a loss. The difference between those two things right now with this team is so big. If they win, everybody's going to be thinking one way, and if they lose, everyone's going to be thinking the complete opposite way. So there's a lot on the line this weekend, and I'm excited to talk about it. But we also got to talk about some of the stuff that happened during this bye week, because from one perspective, the Seahawks are coming off a loss. Not a conventional loss, not the kind of loss that shows up in the standings, but it feels like a loss right now. And it's actually kind of cool in a way that we got word of this a couple hours before this stream. So, for those of you who maybe somehow didn't see, although I think all you guys know by now, if you're here, you probably already know Odell Beckham Jr. chose his destination. It was not the Seahawks, not the Packers, not the Chiefs, not even the Saints, not even the 49ers. No, it was the Los Angeles Rams. Did not see that one coming. Don't totally understand how it's going to work. They just cut a receiver because they couldn't get him touches, and now they're going to bring in another one who's going to want even more touches. I don't get it, but it's happened. And the important thing to us really is that he didn't come here, and everybody's going to have their own perspective on that. I kind of voiced mine in the video I uploaded a couple hours ago, but let's unpack this a little bit. So, Brandon, what are your initial thoughts on not getting Odell Beckham?
Disappointment, not heartbroken, but disappointment. And beyond, just as because I know people will get caught up on he's done, he's cooked, nobody wants him anyway. It's good. Glade's not here. He's a head case. He's a block room drama. All the negatives you bring to play with him, which I wouldn't necessarily argue with, may be the case, but it's just another indication of a couple of other things that go beyond just this story. Every story's got feelers and roots to other things, to bigger stories at play, to bigger ongoings happening with the organization. And this story does that. Seattle last year, Russ Wilson said, "Hey, let's go get Antonio Brown. $3 million, $3.5 million. We beat Tampa Bay's offer. We get him in here. We don't like him." You heard the same fan base talking about Beckham now in the way they are. We're talking about Antonio Brown back in the way they were talking about him then. And the front office kind of nodded at Russ and patted him on the head and said, "That's fine. That's great. We'll offer him two. Tampa Bay beat your offer. He goes to Tampa Bay." Now, maybe it's the Brady relationship. Maybe it's Brown's home down there. You beat his offer. You never know. We don't know what the details are of this signing, but I can tell you
Mm-hmm.
this: we could beat whatever Rams offers on the table. Even in the
Yeah.
limited touches we can provide more touches. We can provide, in my opinion, a better quarterback at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't enough. Or they weren't willing to be in on this deal, Brendan, which I think is much more likely the case. It's a little bit of window dressing for the fans. We tried. We're in on every deal. We don't. I hate hearing that now. I used to hear that with a sense of optimism and delight and hope, and now I hear that phrase, "We're in on every deal," with a sense of dread. The Rams are doing what we used to do 5 years ago. That's what we used to do when we were going to play for Super Bowls. We went in an offseason. We had Sidney Rice, Golden Tate, who was a second round pick, Doug Baldwin, an up and coming wide receiver. Variety of different guys said, "Let's go add another first round pick for Percy Harvin too." Yeah, we don't need it, but who cares? Let's go get it. I I'm disappointed, roundly disappointed in this. You could have helped this team out. You obviously weren't really willing to dive in, or just didn't want to come. Maybe that's also another possibility. But beyond this, Brendan, I'll just finish on this last point: is it's you not utilizing that cap space. $13.3 million, somewhere between 12.4 and $13.3 million. You're not using this season. It went unused now. Trade deadlines passed. Last of the release guys are out the door. There's no other options now to use that money. So we now know for 100% they're looking to use that money into next season. That's the point of why they're having it. And that's disappointing me because you're not all in on this season. The first season in 10 years, Brendan, where we've seen a depression of the salary cap. A depression. And you decide to save $13.3 million in that season. I don't know. I'm again, not heartbroken, but disappointed.
Right. Yeah, I kind of think about the cognitive dissonance of taking $9 million in void year cap hits next year and then holding on to 13 million this year. Couldn't you go back and do that again and just say, okay, we're going to use all the cap room this year and not have any void cap money next year? Like, what is that? I don't understand that part of it. That's maybe the most confusing part. You use the void years to create the 13 million, and then you don't use the 13 million. Just use the 13 million so you don't have to take on void years.
Bingo. Bingo. This was the first year they had done this voidable year thing, stacking in the deck like they had. Gerald Everett, Ethan Posick. I won't go through all the names. You know them. They did a lot of deals to increase that amount of money. You don't do that unless you're trying to utilize as much cap space as you can in a given season to maximize that cap space. That was the point. It's a little bit like this is the problem where they don't show it is cognitive dissonance. You're right. It's also a lack of what is the guiding light here? Are you going for it? You put 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, Bradley McDougald in a trade for Jamal Adams. And you go, oh well, now we're gonna dial back. Ooh, downshift. Get down off 5th, down to 4 now. We're getting freaked out. I think there's a layer of this that goes beyond this a bit. That's just beyond just yes, no. Oh, we want to go for it. No, we don't. On this day-to-day basis where they switch back and forth, I think there's a bigger reason at play. But to your point on that, doesn't make any sense. And I'm glad you said that because I'm sure you got a lot of people in your chat, as I did well on my channel, where people are going, "Oh, well, they're rolling over the bonus money for the voidable years." What? Why? To your point, why create the voidable years in the first place then? Just don't create the voidable years then. You intended to use this cap space. You didn't, which either speaks to the market caught you off guard, or you create almost those voidable years. Now I can kind of say this, Brendan, to kind of, the fan base is going to look like to the fan base, they're going for it to make or break Russell Wilson year. It starts to look PR-y like a little bit to me.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff to digest there. And I said this in my video I posted a couple hours ago. Um, this isn't just about Odell. It's not even just about Odell and Antonio Brown. Those are the two things that people point at right now. But when was the last time that the Seahawks signed a free agent of significance from another team? I asked that question in my streams. I asked that question in my videos. Near as I can tell, the answer is Cliff Averill and Michael Bennett. Those were guys of consequence. Those guys weren't even like, it's not like you got Khalil Mack or something, but those guys were good. Those guys were valuable. You brought them in from other teams. Okay. But if I'm right about that, if I'm not forgetting anybody, we have not signed a free agent of consequence since before we won the Super Bowl. And that's not to say everybody we sign is bad. I mean, I love Tuba. Who didn't love Atba Rubin? I love that dude. That guy was fun.
Yeah.
I think Gerald Everett's good. We're not really utilizing him right, but I don't think Everett's bad. There are other guys you can probably find, like the Clinton. What was his name? Clinton McDonald, the defensive tackle we got for a couple years. He was okay, but these are the little things you do to fill in the little dots on the roster. These are not the things that make or break your season. I wonder if there's another team in the NFL that has not made a big free agency splash in 8 years like we now have, because as near as I can tell, we haven't made that splash. And that would be fine if you were nailing it in the draft every year. That would actually be awesome. I don't want to spend big money in free agency, but if you're not going to hit in the draft, which we really haven't done in a while, you have to do it. Sorry, that's just the price you pay for missing in the draft. And we miss in the draft all the time. I'm not going to go through the list of busts that we picked, but it's not even just the busts. It's the inability to get even modest contributors. The 2013 draft, our best player in that draft class was Luke Wilson. Literally the only guy who provided any real value to this team before he got out of here. So I don't know what it is. And some people were saying people don't want to come to Seattle because it's cold and rainy, but I'm thinking about before Carroll, I saw us get big free agents sometimes. Julian Peterson, Grant Wistrom. I think Bryce Fisher was a decent
Chad
free
Brown.
agent. Chad Brown, that's another good one. TJ Hushmanzada. I know some of these didn't work, but that's not the point. The point is you went out there, and when you felt like you had a hole that only a big time free agent, could fill, then we went out and did it. But now we don't. And because we used to do that and now we don't, I'm thinking, okay, either players don't want to play for Pete Carroll or this team taps out every time the bidding gets high. It's one of the two. I
I
don't know
think
what it
it's
is, though.
I think you're right on the button with this. I think it is the latter more than the former, though there's probably touches of a bit of both of those two to it. But the latter is probably as much as anything with it, being that they get to a point where we've got a number we're going to go and we're not going past that number. Well, sometimes go past that number. Sometimes understand that's what you got to do to land a guy. Chad Brown came here in I think it was 98. You're still in the damn kingdom at this point. Paul Allen's just bought the team. He really wants to go back to Pittsburgh. I've heard Chad Brown talk about this in interviews where he really did want to go back to Pittsburgh. But Allen came in with a check they slapped on the table that was like 12 million past whatever anybody else was offering, which at that time was significant in those dollars. And they couldn't. Chad's like, I can't go. I got to sign. Sometimes that's what you got to do if you have the right guy in free agency. You want to pick up and pull in that way to help your team. Top of the line right tackle. You know, if Jack Conklin is out there a couple years ago, and I know he's probably a Midwestern boy, but if you gone to him and say, hey, Jack, we'll throw another extra 10 million guaranteed for you to come up here to Seattle. Could that have been enough to sway? We don't know. We have no information on this, unfortunately, Brendan. So all you and I can do is sort of pontificate and wonder as to how they go about this business. But whatever it is, you're right. You miss on the draft, you need to make it up in other ways. And making it up in other ways is not just desperate trades at the trade deadline or overpaying for a safety just prior to a season. That's not the right way to go about that at that point. You need to also bring in free agency. And they've had money to spend. $50 million 2 years ago. What did they spend it on, Brendan? Bruce Irvin, BJ Finney, who couldn't even beat out Ethan Posick, which we now sell is saying something. Who else? Benson Mayoa, Brandon Shell, $50 million. And by the way, with this money that they're due to roll over, even with the voidable years incurred, just as the cap sits right now for 2022, you're sitting on the ninth most amount of cap space right now. That's before you roll that money over.
Right.
This will what are we? Is it going? It's already raining here in Seattle. I mean, what are we waiting for? You know, you're 3-5. What's the rainy day you're holding off for here?
Right.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I it makes me scared for this offseason because if you keep the crew back, like I actually made a long video this morning about what I call the blue pill, which is the offseason scenario where everybody just kind of comes back and you pretend that this season was just like a mirage or a fluke, and you just go, okay, let's just bring everybody back. This is the offseason where it's really time to do whatever it takes to bring certain players in. Like I've said this before, but to me, if you bring back Wilson in 2022, then the only person in the universe who can be his left tackle is Teron Armstead. I don't see anybody else who's going to be good enough and experienced enough because you can't bring back Dwayne Brown. I'm sorry. No. No. You can't. It can't be Stone Forsythe. Just no. I don't hate Cam Robinson, but I don't think he's good enough. There are guys like George Fant who might get cut and Taylor Decker who might get cut that I wouldn't completely hate, but they have problems. I think it's basically you have a plan A and then you have a couple of plan Zs, but there's no plan B or plan C there. So you might have to go up to Teron Armstead and say, hey, here's $100 million to get it to happen. I don't know if this front office is capable of doing things like that. I don't know if they're capable of giving Austin Corbett or Ryan Jensen $40 million when nobody else will offer him 35, because I think that's what it's going to take if you end up deciding to run it back next year. And we have a lot of evidence that right now this team is not willing to spend that money.
I agree with everything you said. I wish I could give you some good debate on this, but I look at it in the same sort of metric. You end up sitting in a place where, what do we just land on here? We're 13.3 million. There's whether it was one of two reasons: for PR purposes to make it look like the fans they were going for it in 2021 by putting the voidable years, or rather they were hoping a deal came down the track. There's a possibility here where they landed in a situation of hoping to spend this money, but no deal came to be. With this extra game added on the schedule, that means there's a couple more extra teams that think there may be contenders who should be more in sell mode, who are now having to hold off on that week past the trade deadline to finally decide, you know what, we're just going to have to, we're out of it now, but we didn't know that a couple weeks ago. And maybe they didn't anticipate that. And maybe they thought a deal was going to be made. So how you end up though, potentially riding back into that same scenario this offseason though, to your point, where if you're not willing to go over it on the top of the line for agents, what are you going to do? Go back to the dollar store and come out with $20 store pieces in your arms and be like, we'll make all this work somehow. We'll put this together. That's not going to work either, really. We know that isn't. You need talent to
Yeah.
win.
We've been trying to do that for a while, and sometimes it works okay, but it never works great, really.
No.
Doesn't work good enough for us to make a deep playoff run because
Right.
we haven't made one of those in a while. Real quick here, Schefter7, thank you for the $5. Holy shit, I'm still awake. Love to both of you.
Loves you,
Uh,
Chapter 7.
yeah, appreciate it, Schefter. Appreciate it. I assume that you maybe live on the other side of the world, and you being awake right now is like some really arduous thing that you had to do, in which case we appreciate it. But we don't want to get you fired from your job. So if you got to go to bed to go to work the next day, then we understand. Don't get fired.
Don't get fired, bro. We appreciate the struggle.
Right. But yeah, like I said in the video, Odell, I understand. There are real red flags there. He's injury prone. He's a diva. We don't know how good he is at this point. But it's not just about Odell at this point. There's a much bigger picture here that I try to get into with this stuff. It's not about one player. Like, if we had gotten AB last year and then we didn't get OBJ this year, I wouldn't really say anything. I wouldn't care. I'd be like, okay, this was one of the shots you don't go for. You don't go for every risk. You go for some of the risks. But right now, our risks are, it seems like we just keep making the wrong ones, like the Jamal Adams thing and the all these trades that we make, like the Clowney stuff. I know the Clowney trade wasn't terrible or anything, but it didn't result in what we wanted ultimately.
Yeah. Well, why don't you pay him if you're going to make the trade for him? Then go, and if he performs you for you from the first year, even though he does have some injuries, I know he didn't stack the sack numbers, but we can get into why that is. He was one of the most double and triple team defenders in the sport that year. If you're going to make that trade for him and he performs well for you, you pay him. That's what you've always done with other players for the most part. I don't know why they didn't do it there. He was popular in the locker room. The players liked him. He was a good fit for this team. I still think these teams keep trying to put him in at 3-tech and at the defensive tackle, and his best spot would be a Leo defensive end. I know he doesn't have the bend, but I know that would work really well to give him that extra space to utilize some of his speed, his get up speed, as it were. But that's the way your point again operating. It's just we're just looking for. I'm not looking for the team to think like we want them to think. That's not what we're asking for. We're asking for a cogent plan to be put in place, something that makes sense from A to B to C to E. Okay, you're doing this to try to get this done, to get that done. The Rams right now are all in, and they're not partially all in. They're not dipping their toe in the pool. They're diving in with the cannonball from the high dive that looks a little bit too like, do I really want to jump off? This is going to hurt a little bit. They don't care. They're jumping in. And that's appreciated from my standpoint because it might blow up on them, but at least they're going full bore for it. They're not trying to worry about all the ramifications of how it will go wrong. They're trying to make it as right as they can make it. And that's the type of, to me, mentality you want to have as an organization that seems to be just a little bit at times, not all the time, but a little bit at times missing here with ours right now.
Yeah, and if you didn't want to do the Odell thing, that's fine. But then what you should have done is traded your veterans a couple weeks ago before the deadline, like Quandre Diggs. Like if you could have found a taker for a guy like a Carlos Dunlap or a Dwayne Brown or these veterans who are on 1-year deals who are not part of your future plans. The main guy, of course, is Quandre Diggs, but there are a couple other guys as well. If you're not going to go in, then go out. Because if you're not going to go out, then go in. This was your last chance to go in. So I know that it's not perfect. I know that receiver is one of our strongest positions right now. I understand that you might not be able to get him the ball. I know the offensive line is a problem. I know the defensive line is a problem, but there isn't a big pool of players you can pull from at this point. This was all you had. So that's kind of why I wanted to do it. That's what turned me around on it.
Me too. This was not the ideal. It's not Odell. It's not just about Odell. It's about we've gone down this labyrinth of trying to add players since, let's call it, third wave of free agency. We've got this money remaining, want to upgrade the team, looking for a method to do it. And we've gone down this road. Oh, and that didn't do it. Let's go down here. Oh God. Okay. Let's take a right down this way. Now we've ended up near the end of the maze. There's no more maze left. And we've landed with Odell at the center of it. And it's not that I'm going, yay, Odell, this is the best ever addition. It's, okay, this is a way to help this team out. There was a tweet that was put out there by one of the 710 folks who was like, all these people on Odell, he's not going to fix the offensive line. He's not going to fix the running backs. He's not going to fix the linebackers, blah, 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 blah. And go, yeah, what an absolutely dumb point. Who's making that point? It has nothing to do with how bad we are at center or that we need some more linebackers or the corner positions maybe a little bit light. We can't there's no move to make for those guys. The time has passed. You can't go get any of those players to help your squad out at that point. So add where you can if you're still in on this season. I like what you said there. Trade deadline comes. Offload assets if you're out. This is what we're asking for them to be, in or out. Are you behind Russ this year? Are you going to try to make this work? Are you going to try to keep him here for the long term? Or are you like, F Russ, out the door? We're moving on. We're rolling over cap space next year. Just eat your $26 million of dead space. We're going to build another super team. We're going to get another rookie quarterback in here who's going to be dynamic. Suck it, sucker. Which one is it? Because it's playing this middle game is only going to last for so long until it becomes crystal clear what your exact plan is. The time we're in guessing game right now. Me and you are, Brendan, in guessing game right now a little bit with this, but we won't be in guessing game with this another 5 months from now, 6 months from now. We'll know exactly what was being cooking in the pot here.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, Schefter7 again. Thank you for the $5. Nope, I'm from Oregon. I'm still awake from Brandon's stream. Okay, that's
props, Brandon. I appreciate you
saying quite the accomplishment.
Spectre was riding with me last night. I was on a trip last night, and I was probably just doing too hopeful with Odell. I think I went 6.5 hours on my live stream last night. So we went a little late last night, Spectre7. I appreciate you hanging though, brother.
Yeah. All right, so I think that's all we can say about Odell and the issues we have with this front office. Again, it's not just about Odell, people. I got somebody in my Discord earlier today. He was mad at people because it's like, you guys are tripping about a washed-up wide receiver. And to a certain extent, he's right. Odell has red flags, but there are bigger issues with this front office right now. It's 8 years.
One thing with this, I'll sell this guy on that right now. Hopefully he's listening to this chat right now. The question is not whether or not Odell is better than D. Eskridge. He has an injured toe from day one, walking in basically to training camp. This is all training camp, plays 6 snaps. Now he has this horrible concussion issue. I'm hopeful for what he can bring, but you certainly can't count on it at this point, especially understanding he's a rookie. Question comes down to this. Is Odell Beckham better than Freddie Swain? That is the debate. That is the argument. End of story. Freddie Swain sits right now at 110 out of 120 wide receivers in the NFL ranked by Pro Football Focus. 110 out of 120. Is Odell Beckham better than that? That's the question at hand here. That really is at the end of the day where this debate should end and start.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that doesn't even get into the possibility of Lockett getting hurt or Metcalf getting hurt or something like that. Like, people assume that just because these guys always stay healthy, that they're always going to be healthy. So,
bingo.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this Packers game a little bit. That's the other interesting subject right now. This is a big game. There's a lot on the line here. I think that there's certainly some reason to be optimistic, some reason to believe that we can start turning this season around in Green Bay, but it's going to be a tall task. So, Brandon, give me your thoughts. What do you got?
I think there's two things. Obviously, we got to see where Russell's at. There's hard to make any predictions about how you need to attack Green Bay in this game because you don't know that you have Russell at a spot where he's able to be at anywhere near his best, and that he may be kind of gutting it through. And if that's the case, you're leaning back into a little bit more of a running game. The thing that you see with the Green Bay Packers over the last couple of years, still within their defense, which is that 3-4 defense, and it just has that tendency to give you those natural gaps between the guards, essentially, the guard in the center, on either side. You have those natural gaps because of the alignment of the defense. And that's where you can kind of get to them a little bit. I think the Niners really flourished with this a couple of years ago as they were on their playoff run and how they attacked it. I know it's a different defensive coordinator in there now. They're playing better this year. I still would say, though, with Carson coming back, that is sort of the hammer into that particular nail that you can drive at that point is by attacking up over that A and B gap from that inside. And you're probably going to have to do a little bit of a steady diet with it. With Aaron Rodgers, it always comes down to you got to limit your big plays. You can't give them the free plays, which usually then bring the big plays, jumping off sides and stuff like that. You've got to stay disciplined. And then I'm kind of concerned about their running game. They can give you a combination of Aaron Jones and Dillon, which is your lightning and thunder combination, and they can probe your defense along that defensive line to find your weaknesses. And we have at times against quality running backs had some weaknesses throughout this season. So I'm a little concerned there with it, but I think if you can run the ball a little bit, control the time of possession, protect the defense up a little bit, and hopefully maybe Russell can use his legs a little bit more if his arm or his finger is not quite there.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good rundown of the things that we can hopefully make happen in this game. Like you said, It all depends on Wilson being able to play an effective game. If he doesn't play an effective game, then you can just go do something else on Sunday afternoon, pretty much.
Yeah.
If he gets out there and he's two hopping throws and he just can't hit anything, then you can kind of forget about it. But I I'm also taking note of the things that Green Bay may not have. Kenny Clark, I think, is supposed to be out. That's a pretty big deal for that defense. I think Jair Alexander's out, which means you can go after rookie Eric Stokes with either Lockett or Metcalf, which would be definitely something, an advantage that you could push. I like Eric Stokes a lot, but he is a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
And on offense, I know they got Bakhtiari back, but we don't know if he's actually going to be declared active. They had to bring him back on because of the IR rules, I think, but no guarantee he plays. That's significant. And of course, you have the whole Aaron Rodgers thing, which I'm not going to spend too much time on. I'm sure he's going to play at this point. It would be really weird if he didn't. But I think we're getting Aaron Rodgers. So I'm looking at stuff like that. And I'm just looking at the situation this team is in. And for whatever negative I can say about this team, they tend to play pretty well when their backs are against the wall, when they're in those must-win games that they're underdogs in, or people think they don't have a great chance in. They have generally found their way. So I'm kind of starting to see it come together. I'm not all the way there yet. I don't know if you are. So
I got optimism. The point you made, like Kenny Clark, that's the guy at the center of their defense. They're the most important player on their defensive line. And now you're talking about, again, attacking that AB gap with Carson. Now they've got a little bit of weakness there. I like the looks of that. You're right with Jai Alexander. Eric Stokes, Kevin King. I mean, you got any of those matchups, you've got both those matchups to me with Tyler Lockett and DK, you've got an advantage there. And then when you look at Bakhtiari, I think you hit the nail on the head with the point on that as well, being that he had to come off of IR, do the IR rules. It wasn't a matter of, oh, he's great, he's awesome, knees all perfect, he's ready to go. It's, well, if we want to have him play the rest of this year, we got to get him in onto the roster by the NFL rules. And that's driving that. I had a Packer fan come onto the chat last night. He's like, it's 50-50 he's going to play, which tells me that even if he does play, we're probably not looking at a guy like 100%, much like you saw with Taylor Lewan with the Titans this year, coming off a similar ACL injury and taking a little bit of time to kind of figure out getting it right, getting it 100%.
Yeah. And of course, we still didn't get pressure on the Titans without Taylor Lewan, so that's not guaranteeing anything, but it does make it a good amount easier at home. Yes. Schechter7, thank you for becoming a channel member. Welcome to the club, buddy. Appreciate it. And let's see here. Jacob Kessinger, thank you for the $2. Isn't Stokes out with a knee injury? I don't know. Is he? If that's true, then their secondary is really in a bad state because I'm pretty sure they have no Jair Alexander. And if they don't have Eric Stokes, they're down to Kevin King, and I don't even know. But if that is the case, then the point stands even more. You want to attack that secondary. Now, one thing that I'm kind of hung up on with this game a little right now is the potential for bad weather, because other than maybe the game in Lambeau Field in the playoffs in 2019, Wilson usually doesn't bring his best stuff in extreme weather conditions. So what do you think? Is there anything you think we can do to mitigate it if it's super cold or God forbid it's snowing? Like, is there anything we can do there?
I think that the rolling out in space off of the under center play action stuff, I think what you got to do with Russell Wilson is lean away. If he's got some problems with the finger still and he can't do the stuff, then you've got to lean into the other aspects of his game. Yeah, legs, but okay, let's do some bootleg options. Make some nice, easy potential completions there. If the easy completion isn't there, take the 3 yards and do your little slide move. Or just this particular game, fall forward. Make it 5 yards instead of 3 yards. He can do that as well, maybe just for a game to try to do a little bit of that. I think being creative with the game planning, I think they, again, attacking that short routes. I've been harping on this with you all year, but it's a little bit because finally last week with Jacksonville, or 2 weeks ago with Jacksonville, we saw Geno be the first quarterback really given an opportunity to run that short passing attack throughout the course of all first 3 quarters, where they didn't really go away from it. And they really stuck to it. That's what gets those quarterbacks in rhythm. Sometimes Russell struggles with this, comes out of the fact that every throw's got to be a 15-yard shot throw into the hole. Let's get him a couple easy completions in space, which you as an offensive coordinator, that's your job to do. Get him some easy completions, scheme up some stuff for him early on to make it nice and a little bit easy for him. And then as the game gets on, then you can get down to, trying out and hitting down those deep shots. The one other thing I'd like to see on top of this, Brendan, which would be the thing you're gonna have to fight tooth and nail against Coach Carroll to get, is again, they were starting to embrace this as Russell Wilson was leaving, and that's the up-tempo offense. Starting to really allow him to have that freedom to get up there at the line of scrimmage and let this thing roll full speed when he has the opportunity to do it, when he sees the opportunity to do it. I would love to see that as well. I think all those things that lean a little bit away from his ability to have to make a really tough throw in the cold weather and the snow could help the offense out considerably.
Yeah. I remember in the 2016 game in Green Bay, which was Wilson's worst game ever. He had 5 interceptions. I think we all remember that game. I was at a Packers bar watching that game, by the way, because there's a Packers bar not that far away from where I live.
Oh, no.
So that didn't go well. But I remember, I think it was the first offensive drive of that game. Wilson had Jimmy Graham wide open, going deep for a touchdown, and he overthrew him by like 5 yards. And it looked like Wilson just kind of overthrew Graham, but looking at it, it was pretty clear that he expected Jimmy Graham to be 5 yards further down the field. But because they were playing on Lambeau Field and it was cold and it's natural grass, players just don't move as fast. So that kind of stuff, it's not going to be there the way that it is in most other games. You just don't move as fast when you're in a place like Lambeau Field and it's cold and it's, like I said, natural grass. So you got to find some ways to work around that. And
Well,
by the way, go ahead.
Well, maybe hopefully Russell's learned a little on that too, having a couple of times of playing in that weather. In just 2019, he was in something similar there. So maybe he's picked a little bit of that insider knowledge up,
Mm-hmm, you would hope. Schefter7, thank you again for the $10. This is for both of you. I'm calling Hawks in 35-31.
Woo!
And I'd love to go into Lambeau Field and score 35 points. I'll say that. Like even if we somehow lost, of course, I'd be devastated. But at least I could be like, you know what? This Waldron offense starting to come alive, maybe.
Hanging a 30 burger on Green Bay and Lambeau. I mean, a defense that, look, they've been bad in the past, but they're improved this year. Look what they did against Kansas City last week. So with a guy on the opposite side, with Love not able to move the football at all, that defense held strong throughout the whole course of the game. So if you did that, that would be legitimately impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I wanted to ask you, did you see the, I think it was the Amazon Next Gen Stats article on Wilson that they published ahead of this Packers game, looking at the Wilson's style of play?
No.
Matty F. Brown was talking about it on Twitter. They were basically looking at like advanced metrics to see how Wilson plays. They looked at like deep passing percentage, what percent of his passes are deep. And since 2016, he's ranked second, third, second, sixth, and so far this year, second in the league. He's always at about 15 or 16%. In terms of outside the numbers passing, he's third, second, first, and first. And in terms of short passes, less than 10 yards in the middle third, he's 29th, 32nd, 30th, 29th, 16th last year, and 30th so far this year. So it's pretty interesting stuff. I'll send you the link after, I guess, but basically they just did a huge numbers crunch on the way Wilson plays and how he clearly prefers certain stuff over other stuff. Now, that's pretty obvious to people like us who watch every game Wilson plays, but it's kind of interesting to see it put in those numbers.
I think it's a little bit indicative of why you needed the change to Waldron in particular, whose offense is to feature those throws more when it's being allowed to run as it should be allowed to run, Brendan. And I that's why you brought this in, because teams look at those stats defensively that are playing you week in and week out, and they say, okay, why should we be worried about the middle and short at all? They start to ignore that stuff completely, and rightfully so. And even once they ignore it, as we saw last year in the Rams playoff game, even as those short routes open up, there's no threat to throw those routes. There's no chance you're going to go after it. This is a little bit why I've said with Wilson in this transition, this new offense, it's going to be reliant on Carroll not being in there saying, hey, let's do some of the old stuff. Remember the quote we heard earlier this year about Carroll saying, oh, we like Waldron a lot. He's really open to some of the stuff we used to do. What? Huh? Wait, what'd you say? Wait, did you? No, we don't need to do more of that old stuff. Yeah, that old stuff can be successful, but just to a certain point, and we're trying to get beyond that point. We're trying to get upscale above that spot. So you got to do that by incorporating this new offense, in my opinion. And it's going to take a little bit of growing pains to get that done. It's going to a little bit of like, just keep throwing it, Russell. And to me, this is again where it begins from. The best way to do this with the West Coast offense. I don't care if your name was Bill Walsh, John Gruden, Mike Holmgren, The way they script their plays up in the West Coast offense for those first about 10 to 13 plays, go back and look at the box scores on all those old Holmgren games. If you look at the first 15 scripted plays of offensively, you're probably looking at about 10 passes, 11 passes. He comes back to the running back later. He still ends up getting Sean 20 touches, right? That's how Holmgren worked. It's not a matter of you never get back to running back. It's that you start out throwing to get your quarterback in a rhythm, because Holmgren understood that. Bill Walsh understood that. And if smarter men than Coach Carroll on the offensive side of the ball understood that, who is Coach Carroll to go against that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of passing the ball to open up the run. I love the idea of having those scripted plays be a powerful tool. And with some of the stuff I saw in that Jacksonville game, and I understand it was a terrible opponent. I understand it wasn't even the quarterback, but I I really liked those stretches of game where Gino just got to abandon the run and just throw the ball 5, 6 times in a row. It seemed like that was really helping him, and it seemed like that worked. I'd love to see Wilson be able to do that stuff.
And it's those short throws are there. It's just about like that little throw to Lockett. How many little dig routes into Lockett on 7-yard digs where he just sits down in the zone, reads the zone defender, sits down on the hole, quarterback reads it, throw it, and hit your back foot and throw it. Don't like sit and wait. Was he really open? I don't know if you hit it and throw it. Trust Lockett's read on it. Trust where your players reading, your receivers reading off the zone, because the receivers are usually reading the leverage of the defender there to then hook off the zone and then sit down. It's usually like a little bit of a sub option route. So just trust Lockett and let it go. And Russell do that. But again, it's going to be built on them. You got to give him in rhythm. You got to, if he feels like he's only going to get so many passes, that's going to lead back to that old mentality. But I got to get going deep. I'm not asking for 45 throws a game. Just start out the game letting him get in that little bit of the rhythm. If he's at a near 100% like he says he is, which we don't know for sure.
Yeah, and at this point, all I can do as a fan is hope that he is, and I move forward assuming that he is. And I'm sure you read the doctor's note about Wilson's recovery and his current state, which sounded a little propaganda-ish, but I'm inclined to believe that it's probably true or very close to true.
Yeah, well, I've got a sub in my chat. Shout out to Megan out there who's got herself this mallet finger, and she has just been beside herself, is in the chat saying, I don't know how he's able to come back in 4 weeks. This thing still to this day, it happened 20, 30 years ago. And still to this day, I still feel it and it hurts. Now Russell's doing I spend 20 hours a day on my finger thing. I'm sure you saw that quote too. He's like spending, every waking moment on rehabbing his finger. But it's weird to me because isn't some of it about rest with a injury like that? Doesn't that some of that really, unless you're just icing it, heating it. But look, he's got modern science has come along and money's come far, cryogenic chambers and all that stuff. It's like, it's a lot of things you can utilize now to get yourself further along,
Yeah. When you talk about professional athletes, I kind of feel like everyone's always ahead of schedule and having a miraculous recovery with this stuff. There's probably a reason for that. Like, how many times have you heard of an athlete undergoing a major injury and then their recovery is somehow less than ideal? I can think of two. One was Tom Brady. I remember there were initial reports after he tore his ACL that things weren't going well. And the other's Klay Thompson, because he's basically missed 3 years now with that. So usually they hurry back. It seems like they usually have that perfect recovery.
Yeah. It seems to go okay. And they've got to look, the guys they've got a pain tolerance to it. It probably hurts, but the doctors tell them it's not going to hurt more. It's not going to be injured more, but it'll maybe hurt. And Russell's like, I can deal with pain. We know he's got a high pain tolerance, so he'll just go out there and gut it out. But yeah, I'm sure he's not going to be anywhere near 100 with that finger itself, And I think it's the final finger he's got on the lace of the ball, the bottom of the ball. I have a picture on this over the top. You can see at one point where it looks like it.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Real quick here, Jacob Kessinger, thank you for the $10. Want to see Metcalf with 100+ yards and at least 2 touchdowns against these bum corners GD is going to be putting out there. Of course, we'd love to see that for sure, but it has to be there. It has to make sense. I don't know if Green Bay's run defense is really going to be there, especially if they don't have Kenny Clark. Maybe this is a game where you can. This is actually something we were talking about in my call-in stream last night. I was streaming at the same time you were streaming for a little bit there. And people were pointing out that in the first game of the year against the Colts, we saw us running the ball in creative ways. We were using motion. We were using misdirection. We were doing some more intricate things with our running game. It worked really well. It feels like since that game, we kind of went back to the whole just run it up the middle, run it up the middle, run it up the middle stuff. Like, can we get back to that? This might be a good game for it.
It would. I'd like to see them try. I think the tough thing is it's a little bit matchup driven with that to a degree. And the other thing that I think's been hard with Waldron's scheme in the running game and implementing it properly is that it's a scheme that is born out of mobile linemen. And that's the issue that you have right now is you don't necessarily have the guys that can move in space to pull and hit their reach blocks like you need them to hit their reach blocks in the timely manner to get those outside runs and really stretch things. I'm certain as well. Eskridge not being here, they don't have another backup fly sweep guy, so not having him as an option there has definitely hurt that as well. And that can't be a part of this offense that's undersold. It's not just a matter of Eskridge gets 3 carries a game for 21 yards and that has this huge impact on the offense. It's a matter of it's making those linebackers shift out of their natural alignment. It's making them have to change their eyes. It's giving your running game a little bit of an added advantage when the threat of that is truly there, as it's not been there very much throughout the course of the season. But unfortunately, really, in my opinion, and watching this quite a bit, you'll notice, Brendan, there's quite a lot of penetration. So if you've got a lineman here on a reach block, right, and instead of me blocking the guy straight ahead of me, like a defensive end, I'm a tackle, I got a defensive end, I got to go get to this defensive tackle. I got to move to get to that guy, right? But I'm Damian Lewis. I'm a big boy. I got a lot of sand in my pants. So me getting over there, that guard, I better get almost a running start to get to that sucker. And if he shoots the gap instead of if he just decides I'm going to try to penetrate off the snap, I'm probably not going to get there on him and he's going to get penetrated in the backfield. And if you look at no matter who's been our running back, Alex Collins, Chris Carter, whoever, Chris Carson, there's been a lot of penetration into the backfield. And I think because those guys are struggling to hit those reach blocks because they just don't have the quickness out of their stance to get there.
Yeah, and it's stuff like that that kind of makes you wonder what they do in practice all day if they don't see this stuff before the season starts. That's one thing that I keep coming back to. Like, how did you not see this in the VMAC in training camp before the season started? You should have been able to figure this stuff out before.
Well, and like, here's the thing is we knew this transition would need to take place with Waldron coming here as well. So the other big question with this is you went this offseason, made one lineman addition, Gabe Jackson, who is not exactly known for being the most mobile of offensive linemen, especially being he's 32 years old, something like that. I mean, the guy's getting up there in age. He got moved from left guard to right guard because he was starting to erode at left guard. The skills are starting to diminish. Not a mobile guy. Damian Lewis, not a mobile guy. Brandon Shell, not really a mobile guy. Ethan Posick, not really a mobile guy. Dwayne Brown was a mobile guy early in his career, but now he's 36 years old. And he's not moving like he did when he was 29. He's still holding up okay. I mean, he's like 30th this year out of tackles in the league that are rated by Pro Football Focus or something like that. But that's where I kind of sit with it, is I think that some of this is going to continue to be a struggle. You'll see them lean back into those typical A gap runs going over the top of center as we move forward, because they can't. Those linemen aren't getting any faster. They're not going to put them on a diet and be like, "Hey, lose 5 pounds, 10 pounds this year, and we'll see if we can make it work that way." We'll get you a little more faster. I think you got to turn over the personnel a little bit.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of truth to that. And part of that is just that's part of the reason why I was saying that the Waldron offense was going to take a little bit of time to implement. He needed some time to get rid of the players that didn't fit what he wanted to do and get players who would.
Yeah.
Schechter 7, thank you for the $2, DK, the placenta feeder. I think this references last night. I went into your chat and said something gross and left.
It's probably not too much worth getting into. We're laughing about there's a trend with some mothers out there in the modern age of taking the placenta after their newborn and drying it up. It was funny last night at 5 hours into the stream. It's probably it's funny now.
Yeah, I think I remember that a little bit. Okay.
We get a little 5 hours in, I start getting across a little, Brendan. You know what I mean? So
yeah, absolutely.
The jokes get a little bit buck wild at that point.
Yeah, I've been there before. Not too often, but I've been there before. So to me, overall, though, I think the most interesting thing after Wilson from this game against the Packers, the thing that I'm really looking to is the defense going to prove that they're for real, or are they going to prove that what we've seen the last month is a mirage? Because I don't know if you can believe it, because I can't really believe it myself. We are currently 8th in points allowed. We have a top 10 defense in terms of points allowed, which didn't sound right to me, but it seems to be a fact because I looked it up and it's true.
Mm-hmm.
We are 31st in yards, so teams are going up and down the field on us, but one way or the other, by hook or by crook, we're not giving up those points. Anybody's guess as to how that's happened, but it seems to me that something has to give. Either this team is going to stop giving up yards or they're going to start giving up points. I don't think you can be that good in one area and that bad in another area. It's contradictory to me. So I really want to see what this defense does against a good offense. So what are you seeing there?
I'm a lot like you. I'm aligned in the same place. I was just taking a quick peek to just double check on what I was thinking here with my thought process on this, and it's kind of is confirmed. Well, you've kept some teams recently down, and your defense has played well. And I am very hopeful that this defense is turning it around. That we're seeing the old school Coach Carroll ascent of defenses as they get better throughout the course of the season. And I don't want to undersell the fact that whether we add Odell or not, whether we use this 13 million or not, there's still the chance of you having this turn on in the right direction. Eskridge comes back and he's able to fully roll as that third wide receiver. So you're no longer having Freddie Swain as that number 3, and you are able to kind of rely on him. They start to use their tight end, start to use the short passing game. Russell comes back on fire. There's a way that this turns in that direction. But when it comes to the defense, it's all about the challenge at play. And the last 3 weeks, the teams that have played you, being the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Steelers, and the Saints, are going to be if we took 1 through 32 teams, these are teams that'll be probably at the end of the season 27 and back as far as scoring offenses in this league. So on the bottom rung, I'm not talking about bottom 15. I'm talking bottom 5 offenses. Your defense kind of dominated them, which is good, encouraging. But does that mean that you're going to then dominate a Packer offense that goes from being bottom 5 to now you're in top 5 phase? Probably not. If it does, Brendan, and then this was your initial point, I think, on this. If it does, you've now started to show that this defense is for real. You've shown that there's a little bit of there's some true life to this thing that we thought was maybe a bit of a corpse early on in this year. Oh no, it's actually got a breath. Oh no, now it's starting to self-heal. Oh no, it's regenerating its limbs. I mean, maybe we are starting to see that. I'm hopeful. I am, but I need to see it against a legitimate opponent, I guess, is my bottom line deal on this.
Yeah. When I really think about this defense, I feel like the catalyst is, can Carlos Dunlap come back from the dead? If Carlos Dunlap becomes what he was in the second half last year for us, then I feel like you're going to see a lot of things fall into place, because I think we've kind of figured out the cornerback thing, because DJ Reed's playing really well and Trey Brown, I think he's playing pretty well. It's not amazing. It's not the greatest I've ever seen, but he's in there doing everything that he can, I think. I like what I see from Trey Brown.
Me too.
Quandre Diggs is playing great football lately. I was a little hard on him early in the season, but he's been great. Even Jamal Adams has actually honestly been playing really well the last couple games. Linebackers still are what they are. I talk crap about Bobby in my chats all the time, but he's good at what he does, which is holding down the middle of the defense, stopping the run. He's still pretty good at that. But if you can get that one guy who can really just beat single teams every time and get pressure on the quarterback consistently, I feel like everything else might fall into place. So that's what I'm really trying to keep an eye on here. That's what I'm really caring about right now.
To your point, I'd agree with you, because last year you had Dunlap with his production, but you did not have a Darrell Taylor opposite him. And okay, so what now? That's one of the main things that again we've harped on with this defense, of what makes it work is a volatile front four, a front four that's got dogs up front, a front four where everyone is a threat to rush the passer, no weak links. Okay, well, you've had at moments and times the last couple of years, really only one good pass rusher on the edge at any given time. Well, what if we stack 2 on either edge? And now offenses have got to worry about both. I like that thought process, and I think that I agree. I think he's the guy that would step forward. I think Alt Robinson is, for whatever reason, if maybe it's fighting through a little bit of injury, which I've heard a bit maybe, but he's topped out a little bit this year in his development after showing really great signs of life through last year and the early part of preseason. It's just not really coming as much together for him when he gets out on the football field. Rasheem Green has become a black hole out there when he steps out there, in my opinion. He's there. You're just not getting anything at all near consistently from him. And this leads us down the path of, okay, Dunlap, Taylor, we need you guys to ride at this point. We need you guys to go. I was, well, by the way, I'm on board. Why not bring in Bruce Irvin at this point? What's to lose from bringing in Bruce Irvin on a veteran minimum deal, at the very least, just to play the Sam linebacker role and allow Taylor to just focus his snaps then as a pass rusher?
Yeah, I kind of feel like we've just decided that Mayo was going to be our Sam linebacker for the rest of the season, which at this point would Bruce Irvin off the bench be better, off the couch, not even the bench, the couch, be better than Mayo? I don't know. Maybe. It's possible.
Yeah, I like at least with Irvin, he's a safety convert, so it's like the theoretical there is that he's at least able to be a threat in coverage. Whereas every
Mm.
time we've dropped a defensive end in coverage this year, otherwise it's been like you're not fooling the quarterback. He's going right after that.
Schepter7, thank you for the $5. I'm about to pass out. Can I get your optimistic predictions for Sunday? Also, this is for both of you. Well, optimistically, I'm going to say something like 27-21 Seahawks. That's what I would go with.
I want to be optimistic here, man, but you're going in Lambeau Field. It's been 20 years since you've won in Lambeau, and there's been much better football teams that have gone into that stadium and lost prior to this point in that time that you went in and won last. And even when you won last, you barely won. I think you had a block kick in Sean Springs to take it to the house, even to win that particular game in '99. I sit and think the team's going to provide a good show. This is going to be a battle that comes down to the end. I probably see it like 30-24 Packers. But I do see it being one that is one where it's not there firmly in control early in the fourth quarter and they're just gliding through. It's going to be a fight all the way through up until the end, and maybe even coming down to a late drive, whether or not it goes or doesn't for Russell to determine who wins the game.
I could live with that. If the team gets in a position where Wilson has the ball at the end with a chance to go win it, then I'll live with the result there. I'm pretty happy with that.
Well, let's acknowledge. We didn't at any point in time look at this schedule in July. In September, there's no point where we're looking at the schedule going, that's a W. And even as you look forward to what you need to do to get to the playoffs, if you want to go on a magical run, which I know I get myself pretty negative on things, but the magical run is still there in the elements to turn this on and make that go. It can happen. Crazy things happen in the NFL. 9-7 Steelers team had a Super Bowl stolen for them. As far as I'm concerned, if that can happen, anything's at play. Okay. And so they could go on that magical run, but it's not determined by this week in Lambeau. It's not necessarily determined. If they show out, if they do good, if Russell shows signs of being relatively healthy, that's what we want to take away from this game. Because at this point, all you got to, I say all you got to do, what you got to do then now going forward past this game is 7-1. 7-1 down the stretch at that point. Yeah, is there a tough game you're going to have to win? You're going to probably have to beat either the Cardinals twice or the Cardinals once, Rams once, and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's the way it goes. It's no guaranteed deal at that point. It's going to be tough. You've set yourself behind the 8 ball here. But it's not this Packer game that determines it. It is still your point, though, is in winning this game, to your point, defense shows out. Offense looks good. There's so much you can take away from that to push forward on the potential of this year, even though you still have a lot more work to do.
Yeah. Actually, I was looking up that 99 game in Lambeau that the Seahawks won. I think Brett Favre had like 7 turnovers in that game. I can't remember exactly. It was like 6 or 7. It was one of his bad games.
He had like the finger injury on his thumb and he couldn't grip the ball. And it was one of those colds. So he just couldn't get his hand on the ball and it was messing him up through the whole football game because he just wouldn't go off the field. That guy was just like cut out of iron or something.
Yeah. But yeah, also to your point, let's say the NFC continues to be as bad as it looks right now, and let's play for a second with the possibility that you could get into the playoffs at 8-9. But my question is, if this team manages to back into the playoffs at 8-9 without having beat a single good team all season, then do you even want to see them in the playoffs? That's my question. Like, I don't know if I do.
Well, here's where I would go with that. And maybe it's the one, I'm not a nostalgic guy and I'm not a guy that usually plays to sentimentality. Can't say the word, but you know what I mean on it. And what it comes down to though for me is this. If you get in the playoffs 8-9 or whatever, and you get into the same place where you slide in and you maybe win one game or lose, you're in that same place we've been the last 5 or 6 years. The reality of that is the same of even if you don't make the playoffs, which is that Russ is gone. And then you don't know what happens with Carroll and you don't know where the team's going to be. And we're hopeful that they can maybe find it, but that's a lot of fixing you got to do on a team with not a whole lot going forward. The whole offensive line's got to be restructured. You need running backs. Your corner situation outside of Trey Brown is a complete question mark. Bobby's getting older, near retirement. Jordan Brooks, you don't know what you got in him really at the end of the day. So it's across the board. You got a lot to do. Say nothing of your coach. Okay, you get to the playoffs. At least I get the hope then of one game. I get to have weeks of hope here through this season of one more. Hey, maybe there is one last bit of magic in this thing. Maybe just one last, and maybe it's just the child in me a little bit, Brendan, and the hope that my team can still somehow find a way, even though everything's telling me that that's not going to be the case. But that's still where I land on it, is I would at least have that hope. And you never know when you're in that dance. It's a cliche, right? It's like the any given Sunday thing. Well, you just get to the show. You're in the dance. You got a chance. it is cliche, and very often it is the dominant teams that end up getting the Super Bowl and then winning the Super Bowl over given seasons. But you do have a chance. There is that shot at that point. You only got to go on like a 3-4 game run, right? That's really what you're talking about to get in.
Yeah. The thing is, I mean, the point I'm trying to really make there, though, is what don't you want to see this team beat at least one good team before the season ends if they're going to make it to the playoffs? Like, find a way to beat Arizona. If you
Well,
don't
they're
beat the
gonna.
Packers, then beat Arizona or beat the Rams or beat Arizona in week 17 if they're trying. Because if you think about teams in the past that have gone on that run after having a mediocre regular season, they showed signs at some point of being that great team. To me, the greatest example is the 2011 Giants. That was a bad team. They had a
Yeah.
negative point differential in the regular season. That was not a good team, but they did beat the Patriots, who won the AFC that year. They might have gone into Foxborough and done it. I can't even remember. They played teams like the Packers and the Niners, who were the 1 seed and 2 seed that year in the NFC, to almost a draw. So I understand that people always say, as long as you can get to the dance, you've got a chance. My point, though, is I I don't even know if I want it unless I can see this team beat at least one of the really good teams on the way.
Well, you've got 2 teams on your schedule, right? You've got obviously the Cardinals twice. You got to be, and in my saying they've got to go 7-1. Yeah, you're going to get to beat up on Detroit. Yeah, you're going to get to beat on Chicago if you can beat up on those teams, of course. And yeah,
Yeah.
you get the Texans within that as well. But the key 3 games in there that you've got to win 2 of 3 games, then you've got to win, yeah, 2 of those 3 games is the 2 games against the Cardinals and the 1 game against the Rams. Those are pretty tough opponents. That same Titans team out there that's starting to really light up and turn it on, they got the doors blown off on them in the opening week at home by the Arizona Cardinals. That's a legitimately good football team. I've watched pretty much all of their football games. They've made moves at the trade deadline. Yeah, they're not getting Von Miller or Odell Beckham, but they got Zach Ertz. They've not been horrible in what they're doing in the background of things. And the Rams likewise. That's going to be loaded. We're going to have Von Miller out there, Leonard Floyd, Aaron Donald. Then now they've got Odell added their offense instead of Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson was already lighting us up at the last game. Now they got Odell Beckham too. If I get 2 or 3 wins against those teams, understanding 2 of those games, by the way, are on the road.
Mm-hmm.
My opinion is at that point they've earned the right to get in that dance, knowing that they've also, by the way, played in what was probably the toughest division in football, or damn near the toughest division in football.
Yeah. Yeah, what I'm worried about is the scenario where you lose to the Packers, lose to the Cardinals, lose to the Rams, but then you still get in the playoffs because the NFC is
Oh, I see what you're
terrible.
saying. I'm sorry.
And
Yeah,
then maybe you win week 17 against the Cardinals
yeah, because
because
they're
they rest their
resting.
starters.
Right.
But basically the point is you get into the playoffs at like 8-9 or maybe 9-8 without having accomplished anything. And I know that if we do that, people are going to point to 2010, but to me, it's a completely different thing. Where
Yeah.
in 2010, you backed to the playoffs with a pretty bad team, but that was a team that was clearly rebuilding. And the fact that they managed to make the playoffs that year was just a happy surprise. This team should not be underdogs in the first place. So I was just talking about that, where you back into the playoffs without doing anything of value to earn it.
So I would love. It's not ideal, but I would still be landing at the spot of saying I'll take it because you take that 2010 season. You're right, 100%. Everything you said, I agree with. It was a different time. You had a younger team on the rise. It was Coach Carroll just coming in the door. It wasn't the staleness of what we got right now. All that stuff is completely on point. The one difference though is you got Beastquake. You got a moment in time that almost seemed to galvanize an organization in itself as it drove forward. There wasn't any pride behind that 7-9 season coming into that game, but you beat the defending champs and he gave you one of the best all-time runs at that point. And what if you have that kind of moment can galvanize you in the same way going forward, going into that playoffs? Maybe it's not a Super Bowl win, but maybe it's a moment or a couple of moments throughout games to keep Russell Wilson here, to potentially not have to rebuild this thing fully, to potentially be able to stay on our run and on our rise and keep this Super Bowl window open. I would still lean towards it for that reason.
Okay, I value that. I think there's definitely something there. And I think that's really all I can say about this Packers game. I think we covered it pretty well. Um, so obviously the optimism with this team has been a little higher lately because we had a great bye week because pretty much every team we wanted to lose lost. So I've kind of toned down the offseason talk a little bit lately because I don't think people want to hear it right now. Maybe they're going to want to hear it if we get killed the next 2 games. But I think right now people kind of want to focus on the future. So I've been trying to reduce the amount of time I spend talking about this upcoming offseason, even though I think this upcoming offseason is massive.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. You're right to do it to a degree, and I do the same thing where you got to do a balancing act on it because it's again wearing those multiple hats. One hat to say I'm hopefully optimistic this season can turn around. Weird things happen in the NFL, crazy stuff can happen. Teams get on this weird momentum suddenly out of nowhere. Sometimes it can happen, but then it's not always very likely to happen. And it seems to be somewhat an anomaly when it comes up. And so maybe I shouldn't count on that. Maybe I should be looking to what really is the true result of what we're seeing in actuality here probably play out and prepare for that future. And I think that it's being intelligent in it, but it's that people also still want their hope. They want to still, if there is a hope, if the carcass is still breathing, if there's still a little, hey, he's breathing, he might get up on his feet. You never know.
So I'm not going to spend too much time today talking about the upcoming offseason and the potential of things that could happen, but I did upload a video this morning, the Blue Pill video, where I talked about how the Seahawks could make it work if everybody comes back next year.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to ask you one thing, because there was one really interesting question baked into that I think could make or break that that particular timeline.
Okay.
And I want to run it past you. So next year, you bring back Carroll, you bring back Schneider, you bring back Wilson, and you basically just say, we're going to try it again. We think last year was an aberration. We're going to try again. That being said, do you think there is any way in the universe, because I kind of feel like the answer to this question is no. Do you think there's any way that Carroll would relinquish control of the defense to a coordinator and just kind of be the head coach in a general sense? Would he bring in somebody who runs a 3-4 or runs a blitz heavy scheme or does things completely antithetical to Carroll's cover 3 and just say, it's your show, I just want to be the head coach? Would Carroll go for that?
I don't believe he would, no. And the reason being is that Carroll's approach from a schematic standpoint is born out of the philosophy by which he wants to run and guide his team. So, why do you run cover 3 so much, where you have 3 defenders to the deep part of the field to protect against the deep ball? And why do you protect against the deep ball? Because you're running off these analytics that you developed from the 70s, 80s, and 90s that told you that if you win the turnover battle and you win the big play battle, that you usually win games at like a 74% clip. And he said, well, I like those numbers. I like those odds. So he built his team thusly outly from that. And when you talk about going to a blitz heavy nature, you're talking about going to the antithesis of that, going to a scheme that is going to have holes on the back end when things break down, when guys aren't in the right spaces, because you have less guys on the back end to cover up those spaces and when those mistakes occur. And that's going to go against his DNA to a large degree, in my opinion. I'd love to see it. I think it's the right move for him. I would advocate for him if I was sitting next to Carroll, and I'd say go to more of the figurehead coach status. Don't be much as the coordinator. But Brendan, I'm sure you saw the mic'd up with him a couple weeks ago at Jacksonville, which was a fun mic'd up. It was funny. You literally have Waldron going over there, going at one point though, hey Carroll, coach, do you want this to be pass, run, or run, pass? Wait, huh? What? Wait, what, Waldron? What? Why are you coming over to him to ask that? What's happened before this point that's led to you, guy who should just be calling the plays, without Carroll going over to do that? And to me, it's born out of, if he can't keep himself out of the offense with a new offensive coordinator who's trying to institute his new scheme, how in the hell would he ever relinquish his baby, his defense?
Yeah, that's kind of the conclusion I landed on too, because for the purposes of making that Blue Pill video, I tried to come up with some scenario where I think it could actually have success, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, you're not just trying to find a path, you're trying to find the path that produces good things.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, like, what if Carroll brought in a Brian Flores and just said, okay, you take care of the defense, I'm just gonna kind of oversee things from way above. That to me is one of the ways you could make it to work. Just have Carroll delegate kind of all that stuff out. Say Waldron runs the O, Brian Flores or Patrick Graham, or God, even a Wade Phillips runs the D. And I'm not going to worry about that stuff so much. If Wade Phillips wants to blitz every play, if he wants to run this 3-4 and constantly be sending 5 or 6 people, then let him do it. So that's I think, the thing that could make or break that scenario. So I just wanted to run it past you.
I agree with you. I think it would be a great if he could make that change. It would be so nice for him. I think because it would free him up to get better at other things that he needs to get better at in coaching, game managing, usage of timeouts, challenges, just a variety of things and how he manages things more from the high level approach. Which I think when you have your hand in all the other pies, you sometimes get lost. It's like you're trying to keep all these plates spinning, and then one of them crashes to the floor, and it's like one too many plates are spinning here for Carroll. I think a little bit, so it would help him. He would have to make a little bit of his peace with that fact of giving up those big plays to bring in that defensive coordinator. And that's a part of like the evolution of the sport. Football is not the 70s, 80s, and 90s where he took that data before. That was a run heavy approach time, right? Not as much passing. Passing was coming in a little bit in the 90s, for instance, even in college football at that point, but not to where it is now with all the spread concepts, with all of the throwing sometimes 60, 70% of the time. And so now you have to sort of build into your defensive approach. Look, we're going to give up points. Offenses are good. They're going to score. It's built towards allowing them to score. So all you can do on the other end of that is try to cause big plays on the defensive side of the ball. Your offense is also going to score if you build it right and you understand this in your designs of how you put your team together. So there's a flip side to that. But if defensively you're there to build, to go after the big plays, big sacks, game-changing turnovers, forcing a quarterback to throw a ball a little early than he wants to throw it, now your guy undercuts a route and there's more of those picks going on, which what's the thing that we've seen leave from the Coach Carroll defense over the recent years? A lack of turnovers, right? Not as many picks. And yeah, Sherman leaving, but it slowly has drained out over time. You're going to get those back with a more attacking defense. You'll get the big plays too. You're going to get those plays. Oh my God, that's a blown coverage there, 60 yards down the field, wide open. But for all those big plays, you have a nice offset if things are going correctly on the other end of it.
Right. And that to me is one scenario where Pete can stay and things can work. So I was just tossing it around, but you're probably right. You are probably right. He's not going to relinquish control so easily, and he's certainly not going to do it in a way that is irreversible. Because to a certain extent, if you bring in Brian Flores and go to a 3-4, the changes he's going to make to the defense at that point cannot be reversed without months and months of preparation. So you're probably right, but I wanted to toss the idea around, and
I think,
I
by the
don't.
way, sorry, don't mean to stop you on this. I think it could work on another direction of this. It's one they've not approached in the last couple of years on this. They've refused at times to do this. You've got all that cap space. I don't know what they're going to do with Bobby, but there's 17 million additional money sitting with Bobby. You're going to clear $1 million with LJ Collier's release. You're going to have to do something probably with Russ, but you can lower down his cap hit as he's going into the last year of his deal if he's deciding to stay, because that was your premise, was that you're getting both of them to remain. And if that's the case, now you're talking about being able to create somewhere in the neighborhood of cap space, upwards of having the most cap space to spend in the NFL. I'm not overstating that. If you're at 9th right now, 17 with Bobby, $1 million with LJ, and let's say we take another 10 off of Russell's cost with him on a new deal, because the first year cap hit is always low on the first year of a new contract. That vaults you up into probably number 1, number 2, number 3 territory in the NFL. Do this instead. You're going to keep the old Carroll defense. We know he's not moving off of that. You build up an offensive line for the first freaking time ever. Let's get an offensive line legitimately, right? Left tackle, center, right tackle. Let's address that. Then defensive line wise, let's get guys that can be upper level guys at getting the quarterback. Not the Kerry Hyder type, Benson Mayowa type, the journeyman. He's a good hard hat dude. Just puts on, gets his lunch pail and goes to work every day. No, an actual talented guys that we stack up along the line. A Fletcher Cox type at 3 tech, and then somebody else next to him that can come out as a pass rusher, as a sub 3 tech on passing downs for the cheetah package. Good, you got Jell Taylor. You move on from Dunlap, get another guy opposite Dunlap that's a legitimate guy, not a 33-year-old Dunlap at the end of his career, but a primetime pass rush over there to really challenge. Because that's what makes Carroll's defense work, if it has any chance of working as we move forward, which I'm not sure it does. But it's actually having a pass rush from the front 4 that is consistent throughout the course of the game, and everybody is a threat to get after it.
Yeah, and I have done the math. I don't think it is beyond the pale for this team to create as much as $100 million in cap space this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you do have to extend Metcalf. You might have to extend 1 or 2 other players, but you can do it. It can be done. Carroll is probably going to be a little resistant to the idea of cutting Bobby because there's a lot of sentimental value there, but you got to do it. He's going to be somewhat resistant to cutting Chris Carson because I know it almost sounds like he kind of feels bad for him in a way because of the neck stuff. But
I hate that, by the way. I no team in the NFL is like that or operates that way. It's hard enough to win in this game without getting sentimental towards your players. And we're going to give them a couple million just because, It's hard on these running backs in this day and age, I tell you. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's possible to have $100 million in cap space. That could cover a lot of things. And you would kind of be assembling a dream team. And I know that dream teams often don't work out, but the way you're doing things right now is not working out either. So as far as I'm concerned, time to do something else.
Bingo.
Mhm.
That's where I sit with it. And look, they don't often work. You're not even looking, to me, it's not even looking to a dream team. It's just looking to build up what analytics tell us are now becoming the most important parts of a football team. Look at what the Browns have done this past week with signing Teller and Joel Bitonio. And I mean, they're going to have a great offensive line for years to come. And that's going to be a good football team for years to come because they're leaning into what makes your team most impactful. The guys playing and play out who you need to have at the line of scrimmage to dominate, they've paid those guys. They've got upper level talented guys there. That's doing it right. That's doing it correctly. And you can do the same, but you got to commit to it.
Right. Absolutely. And on that note, I think that's really all I had for this video. So thank you to the 115 people who are in here right now. And thank you to Brandon for coming out today to be part of the show.
Loved
we
it.
will be doing it on his channel next week. Anything you want to say before we part ways, Brandon?
Just one last thing where I say, just to reiterate that one last time, we talk at times, and I know it's not the best of terms with Carroll and everything else. I still am a backer of Carroll and appreciate his time here, and I still am hopeful this does all turn around. I've got optimism. I felt like the optimism throughout the fan base this past week, and rightfully so. They've got something good to think about. It's been a lot of bad, just a lot of gut shots recently, and I get that, but there's still some hope here. Let's see how this next week goes, man. Let's get into Lambeau and let's go get this win, Brendan. Let's go shock the world.
Yeah, and I promise you I will not really be talking about the upcoming offseason at all if we find a way to win that game, because we're going to have more important things to talk about for a little while. And, I know how to be positive on this channel. A lot of people who found my channel in the last several months think I only know how to be negative, but that's because I've only had negative things to talk about for the most part. But let's get something positive going.
Well, and that's why I qualify at the end. Both Brendan and me land, I think, in this stance. We're trying to just be honest with folks. We don't want to be negative or be positive. We don't want to be honest first and foremost. That's what we're trying to do because we think that you'll find the most value in that. I believe. I'm not trying to speak for you on this, Brendan, but that's where I stand on it. Is that I'm only just trying to be honest, and I'll be right, I'll be wrong, but you'll never have to question whether or not I'm being disingenuous. And I think that people get to that pom-pom waving standpoint of things are sometimes towing that line of being disingenuous and being honest and forthright with you and what they're seeing. And I don't think that that's what you guys want to come here to see with both of us.
Right. And I think that's about it. So once again, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Brandon. We'll be doing this again next week. And as always, go Seahawks.
Go Hawks.